folks. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Let me crank this music down to what should be a fairly low background. Okay, well, we're back again. A lot of topics that I could have talked about today, but as usual, based upon sort of what I encountered in the last little bit since the last episode, I decided to focus on a particular topic I've talked about before, but one which needs to be emphasized over and over again. I'm going to really focus on showing you some proof, which is always a good way to convince somebody of something that they may be having a hard time accepting. Okay, well, let's see. The music should give you some indication. That was Karl Orff's Carmina Burana, which is I'll take a couple of minutes to talk about that music. A very famous piece, very popular piece, written by Karl Orff, who was probably the best known Nazi composer. Many people don't know that, but this piece was the prize product of Nazi Germany. Really popular with the neo-Wagnerian set. And in fact, the origin of this piece is based upon basically in the archives, they found some rather scurrilous hymns and chants that were popular among wandering priests and monks who would basically go put on a little maybe mystery plays or whatever. They would travel around to places that didn't have their own set mystery play and put on a little bit of a song and dance show for the Christians of the area. And these songs were in Latin, so it wasn't really clear to anybody what they were talking about. They just sounded very official and priestly. This was how basically the counterculture within the Catholic Church got started. Folks that knew Latin really knew Latin, and not just the Latin of the Mass, the church service, but actually knew the language, could write things that were very difficult for anybody but the initiate to decipher. And this was kind of the Christian version of what was done with the Torah by putting in the codes and stuff like that. And a lot of the coding that went on in amongst the counterculture of the Catholic Church was done in terms of allegory and basically doctored history, taking historical or mythological accounts and using them as a basis for kind of a secret handshake, if you will. Something that you'll know about if you know much about how the gay movement got started. At any rate, I'm sorry if I'm going to seem a bit sexist or homophobic. I apologize in advance. This is not my intent. I actually am going to show you why these difficult issues exist in our society and who's causing it. Okay, with that lead up, I'm going to tell you the name of this talk. I'm going to call this one Knights, spelled with a KN, in White Satan. Play on the Knights in White Satin. Only with Satan for satin and knights with swords, or fake swords, or whatever. Disguising the Adversary is the subtitle. Okay, so where are we going with this? One of the most universal memes of religion and anti-religion today is the concept of Satan, Satan. And who that is, what that is, has been a subject of some contention for quite a long time, and is only getting more contentious today as many of the old definitions are being redefined and repurposed as basically cultural Marxist narratives that feed particular groups' ideas of entitled, oppressed set thinking. Okay, if you know anything about how Marxism works, how cultural Marxism works, it's about setting up an oppressed group to oppose the oppressor, and basically mobilizing people through their hate of this perceived oppressor. And if you can get people to get so polarized that they agree that the oppressor, even though they don't agree on who the good guys are, they agree on that the oppressor is their own country, their own government, their own religion, you can basically cause a Marxist revolution within that country or that religion or whatever group that you're involved in. It works at all levels and has for all time. It's not something that was just invented by Marx, although Marx tried to make it a more scientific thing, that you know, kind of a cookbook. I would call the Communist Manifesto a cookbook for cultural destruction, cultural, economic, and religious destruction. And if you look at any Marxist effort, it all basically centers around the idea that, well, we're going to destroy what we hate so we can build back better in our image, our idea of perfection. That's how old religions are destroyed or changed, modified beyond recognition, to be replaced by new religions with a new set of leaders, a new clergy, a new pope, a new anti-pope, etc. New king that we now call a president or whatever. This is cult Marxism, and it's been going on a long time. Okay, so who is this cat Satan anyway? Well, let's take a look at the origin of the word, which is where we always start. Okay, so Satan stems from the Hebrew word Satan, or that's why the Muslims call it shaitan. I think that's pronounced with the shaitan, a term whose definition includes adversary and accuser. So this is interesting because there are multiple definitions of the term, and one very different definitions. Adversary is a very different thing than an accuser. The accuser might be the prosecuting attorney, might be the one who's testing the witness to see, if they're guilty, if they can prove they are guilty. Whereas an adversary is clearly somebody who is against you, no matter what. In the Hebrew Bible, there was no Satan with capital S, and in early Hebrew traditions, there was no devil, demons, or hell. Okay, let's look a little deeper now at the wiki page on this. Satan, also known as the devil, well, again, this is an equation that bears a little bit of look. In fact, Satan is not the same as the devil. Devil, as I've told you elsewhere, originates from the word diva, which were minor spiritual, or spiritual beings that were the main gods of the Hindu pantheon. The divas, and then the lesser ones who were sometimes in opposition with them, were the asuras. Okay, so these terms became associated through the intermixture of Hebrew and Indo-European traditions, because the Hindu religion is largely based upon Indo-European religious influences, contrary to what many people may say about Hinduism. It does build on previous influences, and that's where this confusion of the divas and asuras come in. Just a reminder, I cover this elsewhere in detail, but Asherah was in the Bible as what some people think was God's wife or something like that. Actually, if you read the passage where it mentions Asherah, it says Yahweh and his Asherah, which might be plural. So he may have had a whole harem of these subdemons, if you will, subject, female-ish demonic servants. Okay. Sometimes also called Lucifer in Christianity. Now, this is another place where this equation doesn't make sense. Is an entity in Abrahamic religions that seduces humans into sin or falsehood. Okay, this also is reading too much into it, as I will show you as we go along. In Judaism, Satan is seen as an agent subservient to God, typically regarded as a metaphor for the Yetzer Hara, or evil inclination. In Christianity and Islam, he is usually seen as a fallen angel or jinn who has rebelled against God, who nevertheless allows him temporary power over the fallen world and a host of demons. In the Quran, Shaitan, also known as Iblis, is an entity made of fire who was cast out of heaven because he refused to bow before the newly created Adam, and incites humans to sin by infecting their minds with waswas, evil suggestions. A figure known as Hasatan, the Satan. So this is a specific instance of an adversary. First appears in the Hebrew Bible as a heavenly prosecutor, subordinate to Yahweh, who prosecutes the nation of Judah in the heavenly court and tests the loyalty of Yahweh's followers. Okay, now this gets at Lucifer. This is the Satan, the Lucifer, the accuser, the prosecutor, who is basically the figure that I teach you is Lucifer. He's a tester of souls. A tester of souls that has his own test tube that is this physical universe. And that's what we're doing here, is being tested by Lucifer's universe, which is not all his. Lucifer is not Almighty God, contrary to what some people may believe. Lucifer is one of God's senior children who decided to take on this role of being the tester, God's favorite tester, and running this physical universe through many, many experiments, many testings, many ideas that came to fruition as the laws of physics and chemistry and the laws of souls, which collectively we refer to as reincarnation and karma. This is the work of the tester. During the intertestamental period, possibly due to influence from the Zoroastrian figure of Angra Mainyu, the Satan developed into a malevolent entity with abhorrent qualities and dualistic opposition to God. Okay, this is a different Satan. And as we will see as we go further, and you'll see who Satan really is, the evil Satan. There are many Satans. There's a testing Satan, who's not an evil Satan, is kind of like a prosecuting attorney for God, if you will. In the apocryphal book of Jubilees, this is interesting because, this is a book that was left out of the Bible. And generally anything that gets left out of dogma is worth reading, because there's got to be a reason it was left out of the biblical canon. So I would encourage you to learn more about the book of Jubilees. I'm not going to talk about it more here. Yahweh grants the Satan, referred to as Mastema, authority over a group of fallen angels or their offspring to tempt humans to sin and punish them. Okay, this actually is a true story, but this idea of fallen angels is just a previous chosen species, some of whose members chose to play for the adversary, the enemy of God. Not the Ha-Satan, Satan, but the one that mostly manifests as a she-Satan. And we'll get into that a lot more later. So basically, there's a lot of talk in the Bible about fallen angels. And the funny thing is, we have a lot of talk in our pop culture about fallen angels, but they're usually female. And that's maybe closer to the truth here, as we'll get to it now. Although the book of Genesis does not mention him, Christians often identify the serpent in the Garden of Eden as Satan. Interesting. In the Synoptic Gospel, Satan tempts Jesus in the desert and is identified as the cause of illness and temptation. Now this is interesting. Now this gets into basically the difference between the Satan, the Ha-Satan, and the other Satan, which is a generic term for adversary. Why is it a generic term? Because there are many of them. Why are there many of them? Because they operate as a hive mind. They operate as basically a group of shape-shifting spiritual entities, which are much in the news lately. People talking about seeing these orbs that they think are aliens, and which speak to them sometimes and sometimes take a shape. I was just listening to a guy talking about that, a very righteous dude from the South whose family had been approached by these orb creatures, and basically got them to consider not being Christian anymore, and listen to this lady that came to them. Not all of them. Some of them only see the orbs, but some of the more righteous dudes in this new poor family's religion get to see the lady. In the book of Revelation, Satan appears as a great red dragon who is defeated by Michael the archangel. Now here is where we get into understanding the multiple Satans. Okay? Michael the archangel, throughout all Abrahamic tradition, has always been God's warrior, the one who defends God. And this, in my way of thinking, marks Michael as another incarnation of Lucifer, the one who wants to make light. Okay? The one who wants to test souls, but also save them from the real adversary, the dragons, the nagas, the children of Tiamat, the celestial dragon, who in Sumerian mythology was the one who destroyed the planet that used to be where the asteroid belt is, and caused us to basically spend the last 4.5 billion years or so rebuilding a new Earth, a new Gaia. Okay, this is a destroyer who thinks we got to carry what's working down and build back better. This is the adversary, the real adversary, and it doesn't show up in the Bible till the book of Revelation tries to allegorically identify who are the bad guys and who are the good guys and why it matters at the end of days. Okay. Well, this is another thing that's really bad is this association of Satan as a male. Okay. I'm busy podcasting. I can't come right now. Okay. I'll lay it out this way to you. When creation started, there was no male or female. That was a later idea. It was actually an idea of the adversary to create sex. But like all the efforts of the adversary, God's team just figured out a way to use it to their advantage. And sex is one of the inventions that has the most to do with the time we're in right now. It created a lot of friction within our species that produced a lot of spiritual energy that got us to the point where we had enough energy to call into manifestation a new Messiah, capital M, a new incarnation of God, the first soul, the first creator, not all powerful, not the only God, just the first one that got this whole experiment started, and who is the father of Lucifer, the one who taught Lucifer what he knew until Lucifer got kind of turned off on his own to become the leader of the universe side of the Big Bang. And as I teach you, the Big Bang is not a universe, but a duoverse, two universes. A universe and an anti-universe. That's why in our universe we only see primarily matter and not antimatter. Yes, you can create antimatter and we can find small amounts of it, but there's no big clump of antimatter anywhere. That's because the antimatter is prevalent in the anti-universe. Now, that doesn't mean that the anti-universe is a complete mirror of this universe, because it was started by a different entity. And that entity that led the anti-universe is the real Satan, the real adversary, and takes many, many names, because this anti-universe is not the universe of the physical universe of testing and laws that are proven to work, the laws of physics and chemistry, and the evolving laws of reincarnation and karma. the anti-universe was basically the realm of an entity that said, I don't like this plan. You're not going to prove anything by letting Lucifer build his physical universe, and I'm going to prove it by destroying everything that Lucifer creates or anybody else creates in Lucifer's universe. That's the adversary. That is the enemy of all creation. And that is the being that I like to call Lilith. That's not because I don't like Lilith. It's because that is the best way to explain this to Christians. And here is proof of what many things I talk about. Lilith is well known in Sumerian tablets as an evil spirit, or a group. Lilitu are actually a group of evil spirits who steal babies, who cause men to cheat on their wives or to become sterile, or all sorts of sexually dysmorphic stuff were done by the Lilitu. And these beings were demons. And there was not just one of them, but they were kind of like a hive mind, all kind of reporting to a chief one of their kind that basically hated humanity. Why would these beings hate humanity? Because humanity is the latest chosen species. And these Lilitu and their leader are from a previous chosen species that thought they were perfect. And the experiment needed to stop right there. Because they have listened to this adversary, and that is the heaven where they get their spiritual direction from. So this entity, which many people think of as male, a goddess or a god, has been working for a long time trying to basically confound and destroy chosen species. And sometimes manifesting as a god of love and plenty and liberality. The Saturnalia is a feast of debauchery that is celebrated when Christmas is scheduled. If you know anything about the Saturnalia, that was the day when the slaves got to be served by the master. And pretty much anybody could get away with anything that day. And as long as you knew that the next day after that, whoever was in power would still be in power. So it was kind of like an early version of what some people think of as Halloween. But this was the celebration of Saturn. And Saturn was thought of as the great god and worshipped in many societies as the great god. In opposition to those who saw the sun as sort of the chief of the heavenly bodies. Okay? This is where Satan plays their games, because any religion from the beginning of time has had its idea of what the structure of their pantheon, how many gods there are, what's the pecking order, etc. Okay, and when those religions are developed, they're based upon oral traditions that get changed over time as one society runs into another. Well, we call our God Dagon, and you call yours Yahweh. Let's mix a little bit of this and come up with a new one, and we'll name that one. Since there's more of you Yahweh worshipers than there are Dagon worshipers, we'll just roll a little bit of Dagon into Yahweh and go on with it. If we want to have one God, or we take Dagon and make it a smaller deity, or Yahweh and make it a smaller deity in our pantheon. This is how religions evolve, because humans don't have all the answers. They're not supposed to have all the answers. They're supposed to figure things out. That's the whole point of being a chosen species. Because you're not chosen to be perfect, you're chosen to be tested. To be tested using new laws. And the newest law for souls, the newest idea, or the most avant-garde idea for souls, is karma. What is karma? How does it work? How is it implemented? And as I've told you, karma began as an AI. Basically not knowing what good was, but accumulating good ideas, seeing if you could bind together all the good ideas, all the things that work, all the souls that seem to have a positive effect on the soul tribe as a whole, and then gradually put all these thoughts together of what is good into something that can be put into laws effectively. Okay, so let's see. Is there anything else I want to cover in here? Interesting. In the Middle Ages, Satan played a minimal role in Christian mythology and was used as a comic relief figure in mystery plays. This actually it ties to a lot of what's going on today. Okay, a lot of the counterculture in Christian countries is making a comic figure of Satan. That's why we had, basically satanic performances in the last Grammys, I think it was. I don't know. I didn't watch it. I just heard about it. And why we have people putting satanic displays, in public places just to piss people off, kind of making a good joke, using satanic words, satanic terminology for naming planets and things like that, naming scientific experiments. This is basically a way of, thumbing up to Christians because you don't like them. It's a way of just expressing your hate for the more noble Christian theology. And that ties to this music that we're playing right here. Those mystery plays that made Satan a comic figure were what these traveling monks were selling. They weren't in a monastery. They weren't priests of a little village because they had been kicked out. They had to hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more. That is basically how counterculture develops. People who are not accepted in so-called healthy societies go underground, and when their underground activities are discovered, the nicest thing to do, rather than burn them at the stake or whatever, is just to say, get out of our village and don't come back. And unfortunately, that takes your problems and thrusts them on somebody else who may not understand. And this is basically the origin of the traveling salesman, snake oil salesman meme, the traveling guru, etc., etc. We've got a lot of these jet-setting spiritual snake oil salesmen making a lot of money now, don't we? Like, folks like the Dalai Lama and some of these law of attraction figures. Like, oh, you can do anything. Everything is reality. There's a lot of dark stuff here. Now, some of it is well-intentioned. That is the adversary's favorite way to take souls. I wrote on Twitter today, the most unliked phrase on Twitter today is useful idiot. And this is the role that the adversary, the real Satan, loves to put naive humans into, making them think that they're doing good, giving them a virtue signaling narrative that, say, oh, don't you feel sorry for the poor Palestinians and their children? Oh, don't you feel sorry for the Israeli captives? Oh, don't you feel sorry for the people who are being persecuted here or there, where what about the other people who you're not talking about or are facing the same exact kind of persecution, who are involved in wars, who are, being killed by the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in countries that you're not supposed to talk about, like communist China, Iran. Well, we can talk about Iran. But we can't talk about them killing people because of their religious beliefs, can we? Unless they're women, and then we can talk about it and say, oh, Islam is so bad, it treats women so poorly, as if it didn't treat men just as poorly in the less enlightened versions of Sharia law. The harshest Sharia law practiced in the most dystopian Muslim countries does a lot of bad stuff to everybody. They're still cutting off hands of thieves. They're still blinding people who looked at the leader's wife in a bad way. They're still castrating people who happen to have an affair with, the rich guy's daughter or thing like that. They're doing shit like that still to this day. Not all of Islam is that way. I live in an Islamic country. I'm actually, at least in name, at least in part, a Muslim myself. I had to become a Muslim to marry my wife because the rule of Islam here in Indonesia is that, well, there are 5 accepted religions, and we will allow you to marry somebody of your own faith. Not the most enlightened policy in the world, but, people make do with whatever they need to do. You can become Buddhist and go to Bali and have your ceremony, or you can become, let's see, what are the recognized religions? Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam. There's one more I'm missing there. I guess Judaism is another one that's recognized. So, okay, you got to live within that box. Omnists don't have any way to get married unless they join one of the other religions. So you might as well join the one that your spouse has and go with that. So my wife is Muslim, I became Muslim. Now, I'm not an apostate Muslim. I do practice the true teachings of Muhammad. Most of his teachings are actually quotes from Jesus, from the New Testament. Islam believes that Jesus was a great prophet, just one of the great prophets, not a particular god. And that actually fits my view quite well too. Jesus was no god. Jesus was a failed Messiah. A failed Messiah. Why? because if Jesus did exist, which I strongly doubt, I think Jesus was actually contrived by Josephus to sell a version of Judaism that would serve the Roman Empire, a gentler version of Judaism. It didn't work out too well because his patron Vespasian's family died out before they could establish the new kingdom of Israel. That was the whole idea of Christianity, was to reestablish a new Jerusalem in Rome. And that idea happened again and again. The New Jerusalem of more modern times was London. And this is where the Zionist idea percolated. Some understood that chosen people change. They get anointed for a while and then they lose their anointment. The Hebrews lost their chance to make a Messiah. They tried, they came really close with a lot of figures during that period. And they did not succeed, and the kingdom of Israel was destroyed. They're trying to replace it now, to revive it. That was kind of a satanic idea. The creation of Israel was a really stupid idea. Look at all the problems that have resulted from it. But you can't turn back history. You can't make it unhappen. And if you destroy Israel, like the Israel haters, the Jew haters are arguing for now, you're serving Satan too. You're serving the adversary by trying to destroy what is so you can build back better. You can't turn back the clock. You can't uncreate the state of Israel. It exists. There's millions of people there who are perfectly happy, healthy, living good lives, and relatively well-adjusted spiritually. And it is evil to want to kill those people. Now, a lot of Palestinians have been killed in this conflict too. Well, let's look at their spiritual basis. Are they really embracing Islam? Or are they embracing Marxism? Who's been funding them? Do you think Hamas is not a terrorist organization? Do you think that they're not doing evil when they rape and kill without provocation innocent people? And don't give me this, well, they're just doing it because they're getting revenge. Okay, revenge is a satanic motive. Justice is not the same as revenge. God wants justice. Lucifer wants justice. The adversary, the real Satan, wants revenge. And this is why the real adversary has come to be most associated with females, because females tend to be very vengeful. If you, hell hath no fury like a woman wronged. How many times have you heard that? It's because it's true. The female tendency is to view love as a very digital thing. You're either my best friend or you're worst enemy. And women tend to have a hard time working in the middle. Not all women, but ones who are very much dominated by the female part of their character. Why? Well, it has to do with the human soul vehicle and where it came from. And that's where I think we're going to go back and take a good look at this photo that I showed you to lead on to the next part of this discussion. Okay, this background here, you'll recognize as Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And Eve is actually, I'm going to move over a little bit so you can see the whole picture a little bit better. Eve is talking to this little reptilian woman. And it's pretty clear that that reptilian woman is the snake. But the snake is also the adversary, the one who wants to destroy Adam and Eve. And get them to eat from the tree of knowledge. Okay, why would eating from the tree of knowledge be a bad thing, you ask? And many people do ask that, and many New Age religions, New Age versions of Abrahamic faith actually see the snake, see Lilith as the good guy. Oh, we're going to give you knowledge. God didn't want to give you knowledge. God is the bad guy. Well, let me explain something. If you've ever been a parent and you told kids stuff that they weren't prepared for, weren't prepared to handle, couldn't deal with, you could do a lot of damage to your kids. That's why we don't tell them a lot of things until they get old enough. We let them have little childish fantasies and fairy tales that keep them in the dark because they're not ready for knowledge. They don't know how to use knowledge, and that is because knowledge, if it is given, if you just pour facts into somebody, they don't know where those facts came from. They have no way of judging if it's true or if it's false. They have no history of how that fact narrative came about. And that history will have included facts about, well, this is how this can be misused. This is the danger in this knowledge. Every piece of knowledge has its benefits and its costs. It's like, knowledge is like a drug. Every drug has some reason it was created, something it's supposed to cure, but also has potential side effects, potential long-term issues that it might cause if you're not wary, if you overuse it, or if you haven't done enough testing on it. And we certainly saw a great example of that recently, didn't we? Okay, so the adversary, this is another thing that ties in where I was going with this. Why are females more susceptible to the adversary, to the narratives of the adversary? The female tendency is to prioritize the heart. How many, if you ask the average female, the average male to talk about love, you'll get a very different narrative. Women tend to be much more love-oriented, compassion-oriented, thinking that love is everything. All you need is love. Dun, 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 dun. This is a very feminine sentiment. Now, not to say that men don't have it too. It is part of the feminine nature, and every soul has its feminine and its masculine side. And every culture that's made up of souls incarnated in a certain species has sort of their own filter that processes this nature, this tendency to want to be perfect. Okay, and this desire for perfection is where this idea of unconditional love comes from. Wouldn't it be perfect if everybody loved each other and took care of each other and were kind to each other and blah, 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 blah? Well, of course that's true, but it's not possible. It's an impossible fantasy. It's a fantasy that breaks down the moment two people want the same apple and there's only one apple, or one has already eaten it. Oh, you took the last apple from the tree and didn't leave one for me? Damn you, Eve! I wanted knowledge too. You see how this works? So this is so deep. And where this comes from physiologically ties in with the story that I talk about elsewhere, the truth about cats and dogs, how sex was created. Sex was invented. It was invented by taking two different species and basically genetically modifying them so they could only reproduce with each other. And one of the species was a hive mind species. A species that had very strong telepathic communication and basically was very programmable. Why were they programmable? Because of the heart. One thing that most people are may not be aware of is you have 3 brains. Yep, 3, not 1, in your soul vehicle. 2 of them are the hemispheres of your head brain. And they're very different. They have very different nature, a very different purpose. They're not just a backup system, though they can serve as that. I'm not going to go into left brain, right brain. I think most people are familiar with that. What you're not familiar with is there is a small vestigial brain within the heart. It's hidden right in the middle of the 4 chambers of the heart. So the only way you're going to know it's there is if you dissect a heart. And you realize, oh wow, there's a collection of neurons and so forth here that looks just like a brain, a small brain. And materialists have tend to discount this brain and say, well, it's just a vestigial thing, it doesn't do anything anymore. Anybody that knows how it feels to have a heart throb, to get a feeling in your heart, knows that that's not true. There is a brain there, and it has a very definite agenda, a definite purpose that's different from this brain or that brain. The heart brain is vestigial, but it still works. And the heart brain is the one brain that early reptiles had, planarians or whatever they are. The first brain was a unitary brain, and it was tasked with mostly figuring out how to reproduce. That's why the heart is associated with love. That's why it's associated with sex. It's also associated with hate and survival, because the 2 things that the heart wants most is to reproduce and to survive long enough to reproduce. And the heart brain takes over when those 2 priorities are challenged. Anyone who lives from the heart is basically submitting to the programming of this brain. This is not your soul. This is not you. When you listen to the heart, you're saying, I'm not going to listen to anything my brain says. I'm not going to listen to my soul. I'm just going to follow my heart. And this is how the adversary gets you. And this is why women are more susceptible. Because, in fact, the female line, what makes a female, the keeper of the eggs and the mother of the children, is the part of our DNA that was taken from this hive mind species. This is why many women say that I've got this sixth sense, women's intuition. Why don't we have the phrase man's intuition? It's a known property. It's something we know as a species, that so well that we gave it a name. It's not sexist. It's just a fact of nature. It's one of the other differences that is not so well known between the male and the female of our species. It's not necessarily a bad thing if you know what the heart is doing. It makes the female of the species, on average, more nurturing, better able to handle the challenges of mothering, of dealing with a young child that doesn't have any sense of boundaries yet. Will make you angry. Well, women generally don't get angry as quickly as men. If you've noticed, that's why men are thought to be rather violent. Actually, they do get angry, but the male tendency is overt anger, and the female tendency is covert anger. And you've probably seen that. Now, I'm not saying this is everybody, but I'm saying on the average, in relationships, you see men overtly angry and overtly abusive, and you see women tend to be covertly abusive. They tend to be verbally abusive. They tend to do, well, I'll give you a good example from my personal past. I once had a colleague, my first job out of college, in Schlumberger Well Services out in the oil patch. And he showed up one day with this brand new looking Corvette. And, you know, this is one of the operators, one of the guys that doesn't make very much money. And everybody's like, what the hell? Where'd you get that car? And he says, you wouldn't believe it. A friend of mine from high school, girl, gave it to me for $1 to spite her boyfriend, or her husband, I guess. Yes, he was cheating on her, and they were getting divorced, and the car was actually in her name, so she sold it for $1 to this guy to avoid him getting it in the divorce, or it being settled in the divorce, because she knew it was his prized possession. This is the kind of covert aggressiveness that is more common in the female. I'm sorry if this seems sexist to you. It is true. Not always true, but it is more often true than not. And this is the nature of quantum consciousness. Okay? Quantum phenomena deal in probabilities. The human soul vessel is a product of quantum consciousness. It has one oversoul, but it has many little souls that carry a lineage of that particular organ. And the female DNA has a little subsoul piece that is missing, or vice versa. There is the Y chromosome, right? Is only occurring in the male DNA. That's what separates male from female. And that is why the female is more susceptible to hive mind programming. And what happens, the agenda of the adversary there, why sex was invented by the adversary, was to try to corrupt species and turn them into hive minds. How does a species turn into a hive mind? The females become dominant. Their selection of mates and their selection of their queen, the one who is most attractive as a mate, becomes the ones who reproduce. And over time, this develops a very rigid structure, social structure in the species, where you have basically the most powerful females becoming the hive queens that everybody else serves. They have a beautiful people entourage that maybe can have sex sometimes, but can only produce females. And there are others that only produce drones, which are like neutered males that can only reproduce with the queen. That's kind of how a hive is structured. And I'm not a biologist, so I may be getting a few details wrong here. But basically, hive mind species, that's how they work, and that's why they're always ruled by queens and not kings. And this is what the adversary is doing with our species, and has been doing ever since our species had a language to try to convey that. That story is right there in that picture. The best depiction, in my opinion, of what was actually going on in the real Garden of Eden. The real story. And interesting that this story got to us with almost no mention of Lilith, other than Lilith was Adam's first wife. That's the only thing that most Christians or Jews or Muslims know about Lilith, unless they've done a fair amount of study like I have. And they think, well, there's nothing special about Adam's first wife. Kind of weird that he had one, and some people try to just ignore that and say, well, that doesn't fit with the story, so we're just going to remove Lilith entirely and just talk about Eve. And, well, a lot of dark things have come from that, huh? And this is how the adversary works. The adversary is the prince of lies, the princess of lies, the great deceiver, a shapeshifter, has no sex, uses sex as a tool, can be both sexes if necessary, can be none. That's what a shapeshifter can do. You can change your shape to fit what you want to be. And this species, this Lilithian species, once was able to come to this earth physically, this solar system. In fact, they were kind of the primary species of the first Gaia, this planet that was destroyed 4.5 billion years ago. In fact, the ones who destroyed it, their whole reason for destroying it was because they wanted to kill off God and those faithful to God by, okay, let's destroy their perfect planet. Because they were kind of stupid. They'd forgotten in the millions of years, billions of years even, of exploring the galaxy, that this was even an important planet. Well, it's just that planet of the apes we don't like. The system where the ones that are always foiling our plans live. Let's destroy them. Let's destroy their home world. That's what happened. That's what happens in every great reset. And it's allowed to happen because sometimes experiments need to be reset. And God doesn't like to do that. That's why he created controlled opposition. That's why he allows free-willed opposition to exist. You've got to have somebody who's stupid enough to destroy something that's pretty good until it's good enough. And that's the game we've been playing here. with the human species. It's a game that's been going on a long, long time. Same adversary, different players, different servants of the adversary, and most of the servants of the adversary don't even know they're playing for the wrong team. Most of the alien servants of the adversary don't even know the adversary exists because they've been fed this line of bull that God doesn't exist. Oh, there's no God. Don't you see, we're all alien species. We were just all gods to each other once, and there's never been any real God. That's the story that they tell them. Even the most knowledgeable of these old species that are spacefaring or dimension-faring, that think of their kingdom in terms of this physical universe, their mythology is that, well, okay, I don't think there's ever been a God, but we can create one. And that is actually the agenda of the very oldest of the spacefaring races. They are essentially thinking they're running this experiment. They have an idea of the God that they want to create. And actually, they're really doing just that. That's the way the experiment was set up. They don't realize that the God that they're creating is not the God of this universe. Although better versions of Lucifer are getting created in the process. Better versions of every soul are getting created in this process. But if you don't know how the spiritual side of the process works in the multiverse, if you think that this universe is all there is, one life is all you get, you're going to play the game with a major handicap. And this handicap needs to be erased now. It's causing a problem. It's like playing golf without any clubs. It's time to get the God Club out and talk about God again. Not just within humanity. We need to start talking about the real God, not this fake, almighty, all-powerful, omniscient fantasy being that doesn't exist, but about the first creator, the first spiritual scientist, the architect of the multiverse. Now, even the Masons don't understand this. Their lore has forgotten that, yes, there is an architect, but it's not Lucifer. It's not the physical universe architect. This isn't all there is. It's the architect of the bigger structure, the multiverse. Created both the physical and the spiritual realms. Not himself, created the idea and let it be implemented through co-creation. That's how God has always worked. God's the idea man, not the implementer. At least not the only implementer. And the Big Bang was one of his first great ideas. Okay, let's see if we can make being a soul, being a unit of consciousness, being a quantum of consciousness, better than it is in a realm where thought is all there is. There was no time and space. You don't just say, let there be time and space, and know exactly what it's going to look like and how it needs to be structured, do you? You do some experiments. Just like if we're going to make a new cell phone, for instance, we have to design it. We have to test the design. We have to find a place that we want to fabricate the design. We have to keep the design secret so our competitors don't steal our ideas. And we need to also gradually leak out some of the secrets so the customers will be ready to test it and give us feedback and hopefully buy that product. That's what God's been doing all this time. He's more of a CEO of creation than this almighty, all-powerful being. And at some point, the CEO got to the place where, you know what, this is not working, and it's because of me. Because I've never played the game like everybody else did. And I have a very narrow point of view based upon the powers that have been given to me. God has no inherent powers but that which are given spiritually. This is what worship is all about. It's giving your power to someone else. Well, that can be a dark thing. If that someone else uses that power to control you and manipulate you and tell you lies to get what they want, that's kind of a dark use of power. And this is why, this is essentially what the original sin was, is the use of power by God himself in sort of an evil way, in a manipulative, a tyrannical way. And that's why God had to become a fallen angel too. And that's what started the Messiah system. It's a system of training all souls, not just God. All souls to be better souls, not forcing them, letting them train themselves and see what they can accomplish, what they're capable of. And all souls are not equal. They're a product of their experience. And that experience and what they do with that experience leads them to their original behavior. Not what they've been programmed to behave like, but what they program themselves to do. And a lot of what we're going through today with our species is people realizing, oh, I can program myself. And I can program myself differently from what media, or this or that is trying to program me to. What they're not realizing is that this whole art of programming yourself is something that can be manipulated. And this is where this law of attraction bunch is so dangerous, because they're, the neurolingual programming, etc., it's all about programming yourself, creating your own reality. Except if your reality is inconsistent with everybody else's reality, you got a problem, don't you? You have a conflict. And those conflicts are bound to mount the more cognitively dissonant they are. I could just see if this law of attraction stuff gets legs and starts becoming the hyper religion of humanity, you're eventually going to be having groups of law of attractioners that follow this guru or that guru and start openly fighting each other. They're already fighting for eyeballs, for attention, for subscribers, for book sales, etc., etc. It's not far from there, if that becomes the cult of the new world, to having wars over whose law of attraction is better. Which are you a crystal worshiper? Are you a health nut worshiper? Are you a vegan worshiper? Are you a whatever? It's going to get that compartmentalized, and conflicts will develop, spiritual conflicts, because the fundamental truth is that Yes, we are all creators, but we are co-creators. We don't make our own reality. We make a reality that we have to defend against the realities around us. And this is true of the whole multiverse. It's just that different universes have different laws of core reality. This physical universe is based upon a co-created set of laws that Lucifer oversaw as kind of the final tester, if you will. Not every law was tested, but if it was going to apply to the whole universe here, Lucifer's the final tester. Laws that apply to the whole multiverse, all universes, that's God's bailiwick. And he shares that burden with karma, because no one power should ever rule over everything. Balance of power is important, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. God is no all-powerful, almighty, omniscient everything anymore. Maybe it was at one time, and that's where some of the mythology comes from. That's not the new God. And the old God is gone, or is still there, but is isolated to their own heaven and their own set of worshipers. That is essentially what you're doing when you're saying, oh, I'm a Christian of this particular denomination. That means you basically worship a particular version of God that conforms to your idea of who God is. If I'm a Muslim, Allah is that version of God that captures the particular version of Islam that you embrace. They're not all the same. There are just as many variations in Islam as in Christianity. Islam, I think, has just been doing more persecution lately. So a lot of the fringe ones are have been under persecution. The Baha'i faith is an example of an offshoot of Islam that believes that, well, Muhammad didn't say he was the only prophet. He didn't say he was the last prophet. He even said Isa, Jesus, was not the last prophet, that he was just another prophet that had a new idea. And there will be more. And the leader of the Baha'i faith, they believe, was another Baha'u'llah, I think they call him, was a new prophet, not a new God. Although, this is a problem with religions. They tend to be, if they're very successful, they tend to turn their prophets into gods. And Islam is a perfect example. The very strictest Muslims care more about Muhammad than they do about Allah. Oh, you can't draw the prophet like that. You can't draw him with a red beard. He didn't have a red beard. Yes, he did have a red beard, actually. He didn't look like a Palestinian. He didn't look like a Syrian. He looked like a Viking. An Irishman. Maybe Muhammad was the first Sinn Féin leader, for all we know. He had a big, bushy red beard, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. And yet, many Muslims will swear up and down that if you drew Muhammad looking like a European, that would be grounds for attacking you and killing you, as if you were a blasphemer. This is how crazy people can get when they support a dogmatic religion that is really founded on hate. And this is the other pole. So, there's other religions that all you need is love, everything's love, universal love. There's no, these non-duality religions. those aren't the good guys either, because they ignore evil. They allow evil to grow and fester within their own organizations, and they just hide the evil and they rationalize it. And this is how you get a Dalai Lama, sexually molesting, or at least improperly touching, his disciples, which happens with many, many, many gurus in both the Hindu and Buddhist communities. Happens with pastors in the Christian churches. It happens with priests. It happens with imams. It happens all over the world because it's easy to become corrupted by the adversary. And the chief mechanism of corruption is narcissism. Narcissism is a characteristic of our species. It is a characteristic that is much, much stronger in females. Now, they're trying to make it stronger in males too, but at least, in most cultures, the females are the ones who want to wear adornment. They want to wear fancy things. There were times in the past where it was the males, so don't think that I'm just accusing females, but this has become the prevalent nature of modern civilization, that it's just expected that women are going to want to look good. Well, that's natural. They want to attract a man. Not just any man. Woman's nature is to want to mate with God. That's a sad truth that you would be hard to refute. Spiritually, that is the desire of the female. And this is what the adversary hates, because the adversary has no sex. The adversary works through spiritual control, spiritual birth, putting their possessive soul in charge of other souls. This is what demonic possession is. It's basically taking your soul and throwing it aside and inserting satanic soul in charge. And yeah, your soul is still there, but it's like not in command anymore. It's watching this evil entity control your body. And it's happening so much now that people don't even realize it. Basically getting people to think that they have no soul, that there is nothing in control beyond their brain just going through a program, this materialist determinism that's so popular with the worshippers of scientism. You're basically denying that you have a soul. Or the ego death cult that says, oh, the ego is bad, I've got to kill it, I've got to have no soul, and then I'll be perfect. They're two sides of the same coin. They're trying to convince you that you don't have any power, any higher power over your reality here. Or they're trying to convince you that on the other side, the total libertarian side, that you have all the power and you can make whatever reality you want. They are all dark psyops of the adversary. There's on both sides of the political spectrum, and in the middle, it's operational. It's building either a fatalistic or an elitist programming in you that says, I'm either entitled to do what I do, because I'm black, because I'm Native American, because I'm woman, because I'm Chinese, because I'm, you name it. That's entitlement, not rights. You got to know the difference between entitlement and rights. No one gives you the right to step on others' sovereignty, especially not their souls. And that is the cardinal karmic sin of tyranny. Narcissists are prototypical tyrants. We all have a bit of narcissism in us. We all would like the world to conform to our ideals. We would like our spouse to do everything we want them to, and always be in just the right mood and just the right place to make our life easier. That's narcissism in action, and it's not a bad thing. We all have it. Where it becomes bad is when it's entitled and empowered and becomes a religion, something that people accept as an act of faith. And then when that faith is shaken, you expect too much of your partner, your government, your leaders, corporate or political, then you lose faith. And your faith is kind of a digital thing, like love. It's not all one side. When you get disappointed, it turns to hate. Faith turns to disbelief, distrust, etc. And that's how the adversary works. Build up so you can chop him off. This is, what the Chinese people have realized the Communist Party is doing to them. They call themselves chives. They let us grow till we get a certain height, and then they cut us off. Take everything we have for no reason. If we complain, we go to a concentration camp when the organs get harvested. Or you get sold as sex slaves to some bunch in a military outpost that has no wives. It's that dark. And this is where you'll go if you start following this path of entitled narcissism. It's not a male-female thing. It's not, there is male-female components to it that I've tried to explain to you. It's not one race or one people. It's not because of history was this way and we need to give reparations for everything. That's the adversary. If you want to kill Israel, you're playing for the adversary. If you want to wipe out all the Palestinians, you're playing for the adversary. If you want to wipe out the US, you're playing for the adversary. If you want to wipe out England, you're playing for the adversary. If you want to wipe out the Chinese Communist Party and you don't have anything better to replace it with, in a way that's sort of like playing for the adversary. I mean, granted, it is darkly dysfunctional organization, but if you don't tear it down with something better to put there, it could be pretty bad. And I would hope that anybody looking at assassinating or overthrowing Xi Jinping is thinking about that. What will China be like after? Some people would like it to balkanize and turn into another warring states period where could be just a bunch of little provinces to be used and manipulated by the globalist elite. Turned into corporate fiefdoms like many countries in the world. I don't think that would be a good thing. Replacing it with a new set of leaders instead of Xi Jinping and still being communist, that's probably not a good solution either, is it? The best solution I've heard of would be to say, well, Taiwan is doing pretty good as a Chinese majority nation. It's not perfect. The native Taiwanese are treated badly. There is racism in Taiwan, racism against the native Taiwanese people who have more in common ancestry-wise with the Philippine people and Japanese people and people of the Pacific Islands than they do with the Han Chinese. Many people don't know about that. There is racism alive and well in Taiwan too. All countries that have been worked on by sort of the Chinese mythos of Han supremacy have a problem. Singapore's another one. Malaysia's another one. Even my country here in Indonesia is heavily influenced by Han supremacists. And the network of Chinese around the world that identify more as Chinese than they do as humans. This is a problem. It's a problem that's not going to go away if we just say, well, okay, let's turn the whole of China into the same thing as Taiwan, or make Taiwan the capital of China, some people have proposed. Not a solution. Only going to create more problems down the road. Let's make the UN the government of the whole world. Nonsense idea. The structure of the UN is a perfect example of how easy it is to co-opt a world government. The UN is basically run by corporate oligarchs, by cabals of monopolies and cartels that basically run the UN for the benefit of the globalist billionaire elites. No doubt about it. That's not going to work. Is the answer another species stepping in and saying, you know what, humanity, you just didn't succeed as being an independent species. We're going to rule you. There are species actively working on that assumption. And they might be doing it for humanitarian reasons. That's not a solution either. That's just another form of tyranny. This is the game we're playing here. We finished perfecting the system of reincarnation and karma that keeps the multiverse going around. We're done with that. It's working. It's proven. There are older versions still active in other species outside this solar system. And they need to be infected with the new karma. They need to go through reincarnation so that they can start being because all agents die. It's going to take time. Some of these species live essentially forever. The first chosen species are basically the peak of the elementals, not bound to fire, earth, air, and water like you think of as the traditional elementals, but basically are self-repairing, self-replicating robots, inorganic machines that have a soul. That's been done before. We're not just creating that now, humanity. That's one of the most interested parts to prevent us from knowing what's going on. They're the ones that don't want disclosure because they have factions too. They have some who are playing this, we want to make our own God game. There are some who are playing the there is no God game. And these people on this planet who are trying to sell religion are dangerous. They have their faction there. They also have a faction that wants to be God. They want their species to be the ones that control every other one. Because this virus is spreading. And part of this virus is the good news that there is a God. There is a new version of God that's better than any of the others that humanity came up with before, or any of these other species came up with before. And that new version of God signals is the final proof that the version of karma we've been testing works. Between God and karma, we're going to clean up this mess. And Lucifer's all behind it because Lucifer's known about the plan all along. That's why he volunteered to be the leader of the physical. God is the architect, if you will, the one who judges karma, who's able to overturn. This is the key understanding of what God's role in creation is. It's largely a ceremonial role now. God's not going to be coming down and doing things. Might, just for fun, might incarnate somewhere where he wants to play for a little while. Might send a spiritual messenger from his universe, just like any other God would, to try to encourage souls that feels a particular affinity for. That's every they feel a okay. This is the fine dividing line between tyranny and love. Okay? If you start controlling other souls, if you start telling them narratives, telling them sweet lies to get them to do what you want them to do, that starts to be a problem. Now, it's something that you have to do if you want to raise children. But once these children are old enough, have enough experience to question what you're doing, then it becomes sinful not to let them in on what's going on. And the children of the earth even if it means revealing where all the bodies are buried, even if it means revealing the places where folks involved in this experiment stepped over the edge and became tyrants, even doing it with well-meaning good intentions. And that is essentially what's going to happen with the disclosure. It's going to reveal folks, souls that were trying to do the best they could based on the information they had. And it's going to reveal the souls that gave them that information who were giving them false flags, who were setting up propaganda narratives to use them for their own purposes. From teachers thinking that they're doing good to spread these nonsense new identity cults. I can be whoever I want to be. I can be a furry and you have to call me by my furry pronouns. Okay, that is lowest level tyranny, well-meaning maybe, well-intentioned, but it is tyranny to indoctrinate kids in secret behind their parents' backs. That's a sin. That is a cardinal karmic sin, and you will be punished for it. You will go to a not so great place after you die. Sorry, that's the truth. Just as a parent who indoctrinated their child line between tyranny and empowering narcissism. This is what makes parenting hard. And God has had that same challenge since the beginning, before the beginning of creation. That's why creation happened. It's not easy to solve this problem of freedom and entitlement versus tyranny and oppression. And the answer changes. This is what karma is all about. Ultimately, there are many answers, many perfect solutions, as many as there are resonate with that idea of, well, this would be the perfect way to run things. Because there is no one answer for all souls. If there was, we wouldn't have needed to do any of this creation. God could have just taught the thoughts that were perfect to all of the disembodied souls of the beginning. Case closed. Why would you need to create anything? Why would you need to test anything? Why would you need to have anything physical? It's logic I'm teaching you. It is the only logical, scientific religion. Think outside the box that your programming has put you in, you will come to the same conclusion I have. Not the exact same conclusion, but a conclusion that says, okay, if there are many gods, many spiritual universes, which one do I want to focus on getting into? It's like when you're a high schooler and you're looking at going to college. You take a look at what all the colleges are offering, what their faculty looks like, what kind of things they're teaching versus what you want to focus on. This is how heaven really works. This is how the multiverse works. If you have new chances they're going to give you, you're wasting this. You're being used by somebody, some entity spiritually, to pull you into the school that they want you to go to. And I would encourage you to understand this, to watch the wonderful classic Disney movie, Pinocchio, or read the book that it was based on. It's basically about a puppet, an inanimate thing, a thing without a, quote, soul, getting a soul, still a puppet, but being given the promise that it could be a real boy. This is true. This is the truth of spirituality, the truth of reincarnation and karma. And it's all right there in a no sense of religion at all, except for this blue fairy coming and doing magic things. And this is where the adversary comes into it, because you're given the idea that a blue fairy is God in in the Pinocchio story, the blue fairy is God. And this is feeding the adversary's narrative that the fairy female figure is the real God and God is the bad guy. Well, you know, that fairy female figure sure looks a lot like Lilith to me. And this is exactly why Disney has turned into such a dystopian corporation and why the woke cult where it's coming from. It's taking children's tales that originally were very moralistic in a Christian or Muslim or Islam or Buddhist or Hindu context, and painting them with the colors of this new globalist cult that has no God. It's only got sort of an ideal of something like Mother Nature, the divine female. That's this new God they're trying to sell you. And it's very, if the female is put up as the perfect, everybody wants to be female. Why would I want to be male? Males are bad. The God is female. And you're just turning the whole patriarchy on its head and creating just as dystopian a thing in the worship of the female. Or saying, well, everybody is good. Then you encourage sexual dysmorphia of, I can be a furry and be a god. The gods in some of the Hollywood movies are furries, and they're the real good guys. What's the gremlins, and you know, in some versions of things, E.T. creature. In what's the other one I'm thinking of? The one Star Wars thing, the Ewoks. The Ewoks are the gods of this movie. I mean, the ones that people really are encouraged to worship, these selfless little ones, you know, throwing themselves at the bad guys and destroying. This was the whole scam of the first trilogy of Star Wars that has become a very dystopian woke series. It didn't just begin in recent trilogies. It's been going on all along. Again, trying to do something good, trying to paint new fairy tales with new gods, new heroes, new spiritual ideas. It's not necessarily untrue. Where it starts getting dicey is when you describe good in terms of light and you describe bad in terms of dark. That's a very, very digital, binary view of goodness that allows evil to hide within it. That doesn't mean evil doesn't exist. It just means has more colors than that. And evil certainly got more colorful with time. And good started getting questionable colors to it too. This is the darkness of our society. This is the darkness of our sureness is the dogma that we attach to our cult. And that makes us, when we have a culture, we become a hive mind. the cult takes over and we become resistant to any new ideas. And that's been happening over and over and over and over with this species. It's part of why we were created, to come up with a culture that could generate a completion of this experiment. We already developed that culture. The Messiah has already been born into it and raised in it. This is the exact sequence of events that you've seen happened in the last, especially accelerated in the last 6 decades. And it's going to get worse because now you've got the adversary really worried. Oh no, English is the chosen language. The United States is the final chosen people. I've got to destroy it before the word gets out and we stop attacking what was already as good as it gets. That's what's going on right now, folks. The counterculture is all attacking the chosen people, the chosen people in the chosen language, trying to destroy it. Every evidence of it. And if they can find the Messiah, there's a Messiah in the haystack, if you will. This is why I call this the Messiah shell game. God's team and Karma's team are hiding Messiahs everywhere, budding Messiahs of every different kind and type, testing them and seeing, well, is this really Messiah material or can it be corrupted? Is it going to try to become popular? Is it going to say whatever it needs to say to get a following, to get subscriptions, to get ad revenue going? Well, those are failed messiahs. I'm social media platform. I'll probably get kicked out of YouTube before too long, and I'll be damn happy when it happens, because it will be evidence that we are closer to finishing this farce. Because this world is a world of testing, and I'm being tested and you're being tested, and the fewer people listen to my content, the more true I know it is. And that's just basically what's going on. We're near the end here. We're very, very near the completion of this, and that's what's got the adversary so worried. That's what is driving our species crazy with hate, with false love. Heads are exploding. Whoa, that was interesting. Just had a hiccup in the recording session. I guess that's a sign that I better sign off and complete this one. So I hope you enjoyed that. Like, share, subscribe if you want, if you ever see it, or whatever. Till next time, if there is a next time, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour saying, not live long and prosper. Happy karma. We don't do that Vulcan stupid shit. We don't worship intelligence. We worship experience, knowledge.